While 80,000 thoughts will bombard you today, just one conversation can make you 1% better. If you walk around with your nose in the air, you're going to end up flat on your face. But if you're content to simply be yourself, you'll become more than yourself. Thanks for hanging with us today as we discuss what erodes and cultivates growth, making us 1% better. Welcome to 1% Better with Marc Lucas and Brandon Mouer.
Welcome to 1% Better. What a joy it is for us. Here we are, show 6, Brandon.
Show 6.
And we have an opportunity today to really start with this question. If I were to take right now your earbuds after 1 week of what you've listened to, and we were to play back everything you listened to this last week, would the sounds, the music, the podcast, everything you consumed into your ears, would there be a message that would truly be a message of growth? Would it be a message that actually would be helping you and I? Because the same for me, we would listen to what I listened to for the week. Would it be a message of growth? A message of you feeling better or worse about yourself? Would it be a message that you feel more competent and secure in your identity, in your relationships? And that's where we're headed today. We're headed today to a conversation. Last week, we really kind of honed in on what we're watching and what we're consuming and the things that we watch. Today is really about a conversation, what we're listening to. The majority of time that I'm in the car or the majority of time that I'm out exercising, love to take my dogs for a walk, and what I have in the buds and the ears is just kind of a mix of different things I'm listening to. But for the most part, I've really tried to, thinking about and really knowing we were going to the show, I thought, you know what, there's a lot of stuff I'm listening to that's probably not the right music or probably not the right things that I'm listening to that really, to maybe a small or even medium or large degree, is probably stunting or hurting my growth. What do you think about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, some of the music you listen to. Anyway,
It's not good.
I'm just kidding.
A long pause.
Just kidding. Yeah, you actually listen to some good music. Yeah, no, I think it's important, right? Just like last week, as Mark said, what we talked about was what are you consuming with your eyes? What are you watching? Now we're going to your ears. What are you listening to? What are you putting in to ultimately get to your soul? Like down to you, like what are you gonna remember? Like song lyrics you remember, podcasts, maybe a line from something you remember. If you watch church sermons, you remember something the pastor said about a Bible verse, whatever it might be. It's very important because I think then it dictates your life. It dictates what comes out of you. Last week, Mark said garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're putting stuff in that's probably not good for you, you could have stuff that comes out of you that's probably not good for others as well because it has a ripple effect. Like if you throw a little rock into water, a pond or a river, if it skips or whatnot, wherever it lands, there's always a ripple effect where it lands. It doesn't just affect the target, it ripples out. And so if you are consuming stuff that's garbage from eyesight, visual, whatever, and you then don't filter that out with better, positive, spiritual, good things over time or immediately, depending on what it is, you will have a ripple effect to the people around you.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think at the end of the day, the reason why we want to tackle this is because the power of words, and I would even say the power of words specifically that are spoken about you or spoke in the way of kind of spoken over you. Brandon talked about last show, just the power of even dads, specifically. He said dads, the impact they have when they truly, how they think and the way they speak about their daughters, that becomes really their identity and the way they think of themselves. The power of words is so significant, and we just have to spend some time today asking yourself, what do you listen to? And again, we're not going to get into, you must listen to country and only country. And if you don't listen to country, then you're a terrible person that's never going to grow. Obviously, that's asinine, and we're not going to say that. And he listens to too much Justin Bieber, but I'm not going to give him too much grief over that.
You can't listen to too much Justin
See, here
Bieber.
we go. But at the end of the day, we just have to really kind of just stop for a moment in this time that we have together and say, okay, what am I listening to? And there's so many incredible resources that we have today to be able to put good things into our ears that obviously impact our brains, that impact our hearts, that impact the identity of how we view ourselves. So whether it's Audible now, which I love to be able to be in the car and to listen to a book. Right now, I'm trying to really be mindful of the car and just say, okay, I created a summer playlist on Spotify, but it doesn't always have to be. I'm always going to go to the summer playlist on Spotify every single time I'm in the car, which you think about how long we're in the car throughout a week. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Most of us, right? It's a lot. So I'm like, what else could I put into the sum of the days, some of the times I'm listening to that music in that playlist and listen to a book on Audible? Or just, this will be crazy, have nothing on in the car in the way of music. No phone call. And just be silent.
Yeah.
And maybe just be in some thoughts. Be in a dialogue. Maybe it's the first time ever you've talked to God. What would it look like to just say, God, I don't even know if you're real. I feel like you're real, but God, I just want to right now just have a conversation with you. Mm-hmm. Or I want to have a conversation with myself. Like, I think to myself, those are some really valuable moments for me in the growth process of me maturing as well.
So good. Now that you said that, like be silent in the car, everyone listening on radio right now is going to just turn us off and be like, these
don't
guys
do that.
are weird.
Be silent after we're over.
Show. Because I was thinking that last week.
If you're on radio right now, please don't turn us off.
Or like last week when we said what to watch and they're watching us on YouTube. Oh, I'm going to turn these guys off.
Now I'm going to Do Perfect or wherever they went. A cooking, like your wife, a cooking show. Yeah. For me, it's barbecue right now.
Better. I think you're going to say Barbie. You said barbecue.
All things barbecue. I did say Barbie as well, but I like all things barbecue. Meat Church, shout out to Meat Church. He's my barbecue guy. So I think in this process, I want to take us real quick to a passage.
Yeah.
And I think in this passage, it really is going to help us in this conversation. So the initial part is some awareness. I hope that there's some awareness right now for you and Brandon and I, all of us doing this together, doing life together in this moment, is that there's some awareness around what you're listening to, okay? And I hope, like myself, you've identified, yeah, you got me. There's some things I listen to in the week that might be funny, really funny sometimes, but compounded throughout the week, it's definitely not producing growth, inside out growth, true lasting growth in my character. It's not producing growth. So once you've identified that, that's the awareness. Now I want to take you to a place with some information. So we're going to quickly take you back to, again, Brandon and I both have a personal relationship with Jesus. Wherever you are on that journey right now, we want you to know that God loves you, but wherever you are, stay with us, okay? This is not just a conversation for Christians. It's definitely not that. We have many, many, many friends that are not Christians, and we love them. We have great friendships with them. We love you, all of you in this journey. So we're going to take you back to a place in the Garden of Eden, okay? We're going to go back to the Garden of Eden, and I'm just going to highlight just one part of what happens. That's the beginning of God creating Adam and Eve, the two first human beings created in the world, okay? And as he created them, there's this moment where God has imagine for me, I'm about to go to Maui, imagine the most beautiful place you've ever been that's tropical. For me, I think the Garden of Eden is a place like Kauai. I'm going with Kauai. Final answer, Kauai. So you're in Kauai, okay?
I like that.
Now you're in Kauai, okay? You've got Adam and you've got Eve. There's only one rule that God gives. Sometimes people, and even I felt this way at times, they're like, why does God have so many rules? There's so many rules. God has the whole list of do this and don't do this and do this and don't do that. It's because he loves you. That's why he has boundaries and fences for us, because he loves us, okay? I have protection over my kids because I love them. It's called a fence. It's called don't touch a hot stove. There's rules, okay? But anyways, there's one rule in the garden in Kauai. We're back in the beginning, okay? And the rule is this. Hey, that one tree, the one tree, all the other trees, mangoes and all the other awesome fruits. Eat of those perfect, beautiful fruit trees all day long. But this one tree in the middle, don't eat of it. Because I love you, I'm protecting you, don't eat of that one tree. So what do? They eat of the one forbidden fruit, okay? And right after they eat of this fruit, okay, there's this shift that happens relationally, because before this time, it's so incredible. They were able to actually talk to God, talk to the animals as well. It doesn't freak Eve out, which is Adam's wife, when she talks to a snake. So it's normal to talk to the animals God's created. But in this moment, they've been talking to God, okay? Dialogue with God, conversations with God, which would be unbelievable to hear God speak back to you, okay? And then they eat of the forbidden fruit. They break the one rule that God's given them. There's this relational kind of tectonic shift of the plates of relationship where now they go into a place of actually having shame and fear of God. Then that leads them to a place of running and hiding from God. They run and they hide from God, even though God hasn't said one thing to them. God has not shamed them or rebuked them or spoken down and said, "You go to a timeout, Adam and Eve." He hasn't said one thing. They go and they hide on their own, and they live in a place of fear and shame. And I share that today because what you and I, Brandon, all of us, what we put into our ears, if we're consuming things that aren't making us 1% better, we're going to live and clothe ourselves into a place of living in greater fear. We're going to live in a place of having a lot of shame in our life. We're going to live in a place of not having the amount of peace that we want. So I share that story because it changed everything in the relationship with God. Yet God, as we know in the Bible, God gives them grace. There's obviously consequences for the sin, but he gives them grace by actually giving them clothes and then sending them out in the garden. So today, that's very big and lofty, but I want us to spend a little bit of time wrestling with this. Guilt and shame are very different. And what we consume with our ears, the content we're listening to, okay? If what you're listening to isn't healthy, you're going to have more shame in your life, in our lives. If what we're listening to is healthier, then we're going to have more guilt. Guilt is this, quickly, and then I want to hear from Brandon quickly. Guilt is this. Guilt, and here's the difference, helps a person recognize our wrongdoings. Guilt convinces a person that they have done wrong. Again, those are healthy, good things. Guilt brings about humility and exposes some of our weaknesses. Guilt makes it really difficult to sell this false perfection that we have everything figured out and we have it all under control. Shame leads us away from God and actually isolates us from people. Shame says more, I'm an embarrassment to God. I'm an embarrassment to other people. I'm an embarrassment to my family. Shame says, I've humiliated my family. I've humiliated God. God is not happy with me, and that's the state that he lives, unhappy with me. My coworkers are unhappy with me, and we live in that place for way too long. And the last thing is shame says, God is sorry that he's in a relationship with me. Maybe I feel like my family or my close friends or even my coworkers are sorry they're in a relationship with me. It's very, very different. Shame and guilt. Guilt is good because it allows us to recognize we've done wrong and leads us to a place of kind of turning from the wrong we've done and turning back to restoring relationship with others and relationship with God. Shame becomes our identity, and we kind of put a clothed label. We clothe ourselves in a label of what we've done wrong, and that becomes our identity.
So good. people, I know when people watch this, either live or back, they're going to have to pause it and take notes and then let you play and then pause it and take notes because what you just said was gold. While you were speaking, because Mark and I are Christians, we love Jesus, we have a personal relationship with Jesus, it just took me back to how much grace Jesus is. Right? Notice I didn't say he gives grace or he does great. Like he is love. He is grace. Like you can replace the word in the Bible, grace, with Jesus. Like he's the personification of grace. And when God sent Jesus to die and rise again to take away our wrongdoing, our sin, he sent grace. In the Bible, mercy and grace kiss, and Jesus is the representative of that. He is grace, right? He is love. He is mercy. Through God sending Jesus. So I love all of that. I have nothing to add. I know there's more notes that we want to talk through, but I just wanted to throw in real quick. I think it's just so delightful, so comforting, so peaceful of just there's so much grace and mercy, Jesus, on culture, on people, because God's after people. And meaning he's not mad at you, he's after you with the pitchfork. No, that's not God. When I say God's after you, meaning he's pursuing you. He wants to show you who he is, but he's not going to force himself on you. So if you say time and time again, I don't want God, I don't want truth, I don't want God, God's going to be like, cool, I'm still here when you do want me, if you ever want me, but I'm not going to leave just because you did. Like God is pursuing, God is persuading, God is wanting you. If he has you, then he's going to continue to pursue you and persuade you to be in relationship more and more, just like Adam and Eve. He was in relationship with them. They did something wrong. They disobeyed God. They sinned. Without God, I like the point you made, without God even saying anything that we have recorded in the Bible, they took it upon themselves because of their emotions and they hid. God could have left mankind for the rest of eternity. Yeah. Literally, he could have, right? But that's not the God that exists. The true God, Jesus, what he did was he pursued them and he said, hey, where are you? And he didn't mean in the garden. He knew where they were hiding in the garden. Oh, behind that bush. God knows. What he meant of where are you is why are you running? Like, where are you? I want us. Nothing happened between, all you did was sin. I'm bigger than that. And I'm able to take that away. Like, I will clothe you. I will be the source of your clothing and your shame off. And like, let me love you instead of you then having shame. Because God's ready to love you. So I just love that. Yeah. So good.
It's so good. So well said. And I think at the end of the day, I think this beautiful truth that we all have to keep coming back to is really processing as best we can, guys, the words that we listen to. Because at the end of the day, sometimes, a lot of times actually, my own worst critic is myself. And I've got to really ask myself, how am I speaking to myself? What are the words that really I'm describing myself and really kind of in the inner dialogue with myself? Because if I'm in a place where I'm feeling unworthy, I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling like we even talked about last time, the comparison trap, if I'm feeling envious, where I find myself on social media and most of the time in these moments that I'm describing now, when I'm in an unhealthy place, I'm like, man, they're on vacation again and they're in Fiji and their kid has done all of that. I failed. My wife, we failed. Like, and we just find ourselves kind of envious of other people's highlight reels, because that's for the most part their highlight reel. If we have a lack of peace, if we have a lack of contentment, we've got to really process and have an awareness to say, if those things are even remotely true, some of those things, then we've got to ask ourselves, how do we put in the right words into our brains, into our hearts, into our minds? How do we really digest and chew on the right words? So we believe, obviously, there's some beautiful truth in the right words of, if you're a music person and you're new to thinking about a relationship with God, maybe you start with listening to Christian music. And maybe your genre is, like right now for my son, he loves rap.
Does he really?
He does. He loves rap. But I have found there's a Christian rap hip hop playlist called The Flow, which is all Christian. It's actually good rap, but the content of what they're rapping about isn't content that's degrading women, isn't content that's all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like we said earlier. Because if we're consuming music, again, we've talked a little bit, we need to talk probably a little more about it, of music that has messages that really are messages that are not making us full of peace and contentment and happiness and satisfied in our relationship, then we're probably listening to music that's pretty filthy in the sense that it's degrading women and all about the party and all about the next drug. And like, if that's all we're listening to, or what I guess hearing, then there's probably some issues, right? And we just have to really kind of ask ourselves, okay, how do I take this out and add this? Some thoughts on some things that you can maybe help them navigate some new things to listen to or new things to put into their earbuds?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the name of the show. Is what you're listening to, or like last week, what you're watching, making you better? Is what you're watching about sex in any level making you love your spouse better? That's a valid question. I have to answer that. You have to answer that. Maybe you have to answer that, listener, if you're married, or even dating. Dear God, like even dating, like in high school and stuff, when you start, I mean, I feel like I'm not even trying to get into like pornography waters right now, but even like younger, like 12-year-old, like they're getting into stuff and then they start dating. Like, oh my gosh, like even just what your perception of that is. And then you start dating and it's like a whole different game than what you thought sex was. Like that, this is a sex talk, but you know what I mean? Like even that, it's like, whoa. And so, yeah, I think, is it what you're consuming, whether through your eyes, like last week's show, or through your ears, is it making you better? And I want to preface by saying as well, not preface because we've already talked 2 shows now about what you're consuming, but it's kind of subjective. Like, oh, but Mark, Brandon, I think what I'm listening to is perfectly fine. Like, right. It's subjective to a degree of what is good or bad, to a degree, maybe. Then there's some things that's like, no, it's objective. Like there's good stuff like Christian music that has wholesome truth. And then there's like bad stuff. And then I won't define that because I don't, then again, we can, well, that's subjective. But we can know the difference between right and wrong in certain areas. And then there's like a lot of gray areas, right? So it's a lot of things are subjective, maybe what you're thinking, listening to, but then I would venture to say, is it making you better, though, of what you're listening to? Is it making you less drained emotionally? Like, are you just going crazy in your emotions, good, bad, and all around? That's an indicator, right? You said some practical examples. How do you feel after listening to something that you just listened to? That's an indicator. Second thing is it contrary to truth? Again, in this culture, truth is all subjective and my truth is my truth. Yeah. But there's truth in this world. And once you find it, and we can talk more about what that is, but once you find it, then what you listen or watch and consume, is it contrary to that rock solid truth? If it's not, if it is contrary, then yeah, it's probably not making you better. So it's very simple to say, is this a good thing for me to consume? It's very simple.
Yeah.
You know.
Because at the end of the day, the reality is we're all born with a conscience. So we really do know right and wrong. And we really can ask some of these basic but yet profound awareness questions to say at the end of the day, what you're putting into your ears this week and last week and the week prior, is it songs and messages that are making you 1% better?
That's right.
That's the question. And then if not, then start filtering things that are true, content that's true, content that's helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind, and grow into the 1% better that God wants us and God wants you to continually foster and grow into. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening in to 1% Better. What a joy it is for Brandon and I to have these conversations with you week in and week out. Have an amazing day. We'll talk to you real soon. Take care.
You're playing with my 1%.